In this video, Matt emphasizes what we all know to be true, that the nature and strength of those who volunteer greatly affect the church's message. Since volunteers are so important, and the struggle with pornography is so prevalent and can create reactive responses in those who are trying to help, learning how to guide this resource in your church is vital. Matt will discuss ways we can train our volunteer staff and equip them with the knowledge to understand and address pornography addiction to better serve those who struggle.
So you have a volunteer who offers to pray with people after your service, and somebody comes up to them. Clearly they're upset, they have something on their mind, and they say they were very convicted by the sermon, and they would like prayer to be free of pornography. A volunteer in your men's ministry is having coffee with another man, and he begins to share his struggles with lust. A volunteer in your women's ministry sits with a woman crying as she describes what she found on her husband's computer. What do you want these leaders to say or do? Because what happens next can drastically affect the healing process. When we talk about training lay leaders or volunteers, this is a topic that needs to come up in that equipping process. And I want to briefly share with you two things that your leaders need to know. What is porn addiction? And what are the best initial responses when somebody confides in you about this issue? So what is porn addiction? To put it briefly, porn addiction is the compulsive use of pornography or sexually stimulating media, most often paired with masturbation, to deal with emotional distress. It's a lot more complex than that, and I would encourage you to spend some time understanding the issue in a more fulsome way. But for right now, we will use a simple definition. And with that definition, there are a few things to kind of key in on. First is compulsivity. When someone is involved in compulsive porn use, they are doing it even though it is against their values, even though they would most of the time rather not be doing it. They're ruminating about it, the wrestling with the behavior, whether or not to do it, and then giving in. Compulsivity implies that it's not what they really want. See, not everyone who views porn is a porn addict, but we can assume on a certain level that if someone has garnered the courage to speak with a pastor or a volunteer for help, they have tried to stop on their own and have not found success. This indicates a level of compulsivity. The second part of the definition I'm using today is that it is a response to emotional distress. This means that over time, often due to trauma, this person has responded to distressing or uncomfortable emotions and circumstances with pornography and masturbation as a form of self-soothing. This actually trains the brain neurochemically to desire these behaviors when distress occurs, subconsciously. Then as the addiction develops, the behavior becomes more frequent and the brain becomes more addicted to the dopamine and other chemicals released by the behavior. They become less tolerant of distress and more isolated as they do the behavior more and more often and explore it in ways that feed their shame. Now, what might a healthier person do with distress and hurt in these kind of difficult circumstances? Well, they might reach out to someone for support. Most people with porn addiction initially look to sexual behavior as a coping mechanism because they probably didn't have support or safe people around them as a young person. Again, it's more complicated than that, but to say it briefly, porn addiction arose from a lack of emotional intimacy and also creates a lack of emotional intimacy. I don't want to go and talk about it with others. They won't understand. I'll be abandoned or left out or labeled. They can't know. No one can know. I must hide myself from others, my friends, my spouse. I fake being okay. I lie. I cover up in fear. And I've lost touch with even myself. So when you're talking to someone about habitual porn use, you're probably talking to someone who does not want to be using it, has tried hard on their own to stop, but has become emotionally and neurobiologically entangled with the behavior to where they need it to be okay. Someone who is harming themselves and likely harming their relationships, a sad, lonely, scared, ashamed child of God. Training people to respond to those with porn addiction or those who have been affected by it requires us to communicate these realities so that we can encounter them with care and compassion. 3 things to remember: respond, inform, and connect. First, respond. Shame is a powerful part of why so many go without help when it comes to sexual struggles. Jesus was careful not to shame those who came to him for help. Wouldn't that be beautiful if we could greet the ashamed and isolated not with shock or surprise or advice, but with peace and compassion? Train your people to pay attention to their facial expression, the first words out of their mouth. We want to be careful when we respond and not react. Try statements like, "I am so impressed with the courage that you have shown to ask for help," or "Thank you for trusting me to pray for you about this. It must be so hard to talk about." Second, inform. Ask if you can inform a helper or a pastor that will be dedicated to their confidentiality and is equipped to move them into practical next steps. It is so important that volunteers not tell people that don't need to know, even the volunteer's spouse. Not only can harm occur to a person seeking help and their family, but it may harm or frustrate the process of healing if there's any public shame that occurs. Third, connect. If you are a helper, connect them with experts to evaluate the sexual issue and outline next steps. Be prepared for this moment by researching and vetting counselors in your area that have experience with sexual addiction and the trauma of sexual betrayal. Make a referral in the presence of the person who has approached you if possible, and follow up with them to make sure that a connection is made. Here are a few more important suggestions. If a member of your church approached you with chest pain, you probably wouldn't examine them yourself. You take them to the ER. In that way, don't attempt to evaluate the severity of the sexual issue. Often early in the healing process, addicts hold back what they feel are embarrassing details and trickle out information a little bit at a time. Trained counselors have tools to evaluate the severity of the behavior, so you don't have to. If your church hosts an addiction recovery group or you know of one in your area, let them know about it and recommend that they attend. If you're meeting with a couple for the first time, empathy and support should be the focus when speaking with the spouse who has been betrayed. Avoid advice giving. For more information about that critical moment with the betrayed spouse, check out other videos in this course. I hope this gives you a starting point for how to train your volunteers around this very important issue.